Hello, everybody. Let's see, am I close enough to the mic? You can hear me? Okay. Um, as Maria Elena said, I'm Isabel Alegría. I work as the communications director of the California Immigrant Policy Center. And I was asked, in a way of sort of contextualizing our panel, to talk a little bit, first of all, about sort of what we're going to be doing here. All day we've been hearing about and discussing critical workers' rights issues and immigrant experiences here in California and elsewhere. So what we're here to do in this panel is to talk about ways to get those stories out, to get those struggles out, to convey all the battles that are taking place. I'm sure all of you were moved to hear the stories of the warehouse workers. How do we convey that to the American public, to our audiences, so that they move in a direction to really support positive pro-immigrant kind of policies? And for some time, immigrant advocates have been working to develop a unified voice to support pro-immigrant policies that could really penetrate into the debate and have a shape and shape public opinion in a way that would generate support. But so has the opposition, and I'm not telling anyone in here in this room that doesn't know that until very recently, I think, the opposition was in a way winning the war on words. What part of illegal don't you understand became the slogan of all those voices that would block efforts at creating an updated common sense immigration system. As our country's economic crisis worsened, anti-immigrant voices loudly cast immigrants as a drain on resources and jobs and people, and being the people that were to blame. This two-part narrative that we talk about, the casting immigrants as a threat to law and order and as a drain on public resources, has really permeated many aspects of the public debate. So, and you know, I think that we were really beginning to change that. And not that it hasn't been a bumpy ride, because I think that over the years, and I was just, I think, telling Anat before that 10 years ago at CIPC, often what we tried to do was keep the discussion of public benefits and immigrants out of the news. We would try to keep our stories out of the news, not get them in. Now we're full throttle in working with the media to convey messages, to get stories. John Rodney, our communications staff person, you know, happily told me that there had been 200 stories in the last, I think, 2 or 3 months on the Trust Act that were the result of this effort to really get these stories out into the public and into the public debate. So it's not always been not a bumpy ride. It has been a bumpy ride because advocates and strategic communications specialists and analysts don't always see eye to eye. We often find there's difficulty in translating what we learn from public opinion research and take it out into the field so that advocates will use it. And one of the developments that took place that I just want to tell you very briefly about was in May of 2008, when the Opportunity Agenda, with support from the Four Freedoms Fund, brought together about 150 immigrant advocates from all around the country. There were people from California, from the Pacific Northwest, the Southwest, Illinois, Florida, the New York, all the major coalitions, and brought them together to really try to find ways in a proactive, not reactive way, to come up with a way to counter what had become really the drowning out of reason and any sense of constructive debate on immigrants and immigration. So together we explored ideas about how to use public opinion research, how to apply it. We examined regional differences between us that would affect the way advocates could take a message out. And we also thought very hard and long about what were the values and desires we wanted to convey to the public about our work on immigration and immigrants. And actually what happened, the result was the launching of a pretty simple idea that would help us to construct how we would appeal to Americans. about the need to create a system that both recognized immigrant contributions, that valued immigrants' roles in the economy and society, but at the same time would respect the law and understand the need for change. And it was encapsulated in a very simple phrase. We need solutions that reflect our values and move us forward together. Some of you in the room will recognize this. And the idea of these three elements were that advocates really had to find ways to be identified with good ideas and solutions and creative, forward-looking thinking instead of just complaints. We were often accused of complaining a lot, but not being forward and creative and positive. The second part of it was what do we value that we wanted to convey to other people? A sense of fairness, the idea that people should have opportunity and be able to pursue opportunity as individuals and as families. But the other thing was that we had to also convey that we didn't care just about immigration as an issue. We cared about the way immigration fit into the rest of society, and that we cared about the communities that we lived in, made up of immigrants and non-immigrants alike, and brought together, through our schools, through workplaces, through institutions where people interact with one another. So I think that this very simple messaging structure has started to appear in many of our campaigns, from the E-Verify program to the protection of immigrant workers from silent raids, to the domestic workers Bill of Rights, to the farm workers and DREAM students. You're hearing a real statement about values, a statement about the desire for good ideas and solutions and working together in communities. I think that we're still in the process of developing that, and we've invited our two presenters to show us the most recent developments in that strategic communications thinking to help us figure out how to successfully reach the American public in all the places we live and convey to them the importance of joining us in support of these pro-immigrant policies. So I'm going to stop there and introduce our speakers. To begin will be Anat Shenker-Osorio, who's a strategic communications consultant based in Oakland. She's helped organizations such as the ACLU, the Ms. Foundation, America's Voice, the Ford Foundation, and dozens of others to craft messages on issues as diverse as immigration, contraception, labor, and the economy. She's also presented her findings to Congress and is actually the author of her first book, which is called Don't Buy It, The Trouble with Talking Nonsense About the Economy. Our second speaker is David Merman. He's a partner at Lake Research Partners, LRP, which is a national research firm established in 1995 by Celinda Lake, who's one of the country's leading political strategists. LRP advises dozens of incumbents and challengers at all levels of the electoral process, as well as a wide range of nonpartisan organizations, such as advocacy organizations, foundations, and unions. LRP has nationally recognized expertise on many, many issues. David, in particular, is a leading expert on attitudes towards immigration and has polled on that issue for America's Voice, the National Immigration Forum, the Asian American Justice Center, and others. So please, let's welcome Anat and David.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. I'm personally very, very honored to be here. This is so important to me that I have to say this is the first time that I can recall not being in Temple on Rosh Hashanah, and that is how much this means to me. So thank you, and I'm honored to be here with you. I'm also going to attempt to bend the space-time continuum so that there's time for questions at the end of our thing. We'll see how well I do at that. So very quickly, in my auctioneer voice, I'm going to present you with an overview of what's not working now, the current discourse in immigration. And I'm going to do that at the conceptual level. Some of this is going to be deeply depressing to you, but fear not, because the answer is going to come quick on the heels of it, and it's going to be magical. Not surprising at all to see Opportunity Agenda here. Isabel mentioned that they were an incredible partner in doing this language analysis. And I will just let it sort of speak for itself. But first I will learn how to use PC. This? Okay. So, as Isabel mentioned, my work is in cognition and linguistics, and what that means is that I use language as data to understand people's underlying thought structures. We call these heuristics, we call these mental models. These are the simplifications that all of us use, they're not avoidable, in order to make sense of complexity. Anytime we're confronted with something abstract and not concrete, we automatically and unconsciously use these different tools, which you'll see today, to make sense of them. The data I'm basing the conclusions you're going to hear about today is from a written data set. There's over 1,200 unique constructions in language. There was a special focus on due process and women's issues, which I'm not going to talk about today because this is the space-time continuum version. And you can see the sources. So is it the arrow? Oh, okay. So as I said, I look really, really closely at language as data. And when I do that, one of the most important tools that I use is conceptual metaphor. This is the explanation of a study that was done now 2 years ago at Stanford. Some of you might know this study. I was honored to have played a small part in it, in which people were put into focus groups, and every single focus group was given identical information and charged with the same task. They were given information about the crime rates and change in crime in a fictional city. All of the numbers they were shown were the same. The single sentence difference was that half of the groups had a prime where crime was likened metaphorically to a virus. And you can hear that in language like it's spreading, it's plaguing, infesting, because of course crime in the aggregate is nothing tangible at all. The other half of groups were given a single sentence in which crime was likened to an opponent, which you can hear in language like this. The differences were staggering. People who had seen the virus language were 3 times more likely when they were asked, how should we solve crime in your fictional town, to favor preventative approaches. After school, preschool for all, things for young people to do. People who had seen the opponent language wanted 3 strikes laws, they wanted mandatory sentencing, they wanted tougher sentencing. Not only did the single sentence affect what they perceived crime to be and what they wanted done with it, it actually impacted their ability to recall information. When the papers were taken away from them and they were asked, what do you remember? What information were you given? People who'd seen virus language were more likely to recall a positive thing, change over time, and recall it as being larger than it had been. People who'd seen the opponent language were more likely to recall a negative thing, murder rate, and recall it as being larger than it had been. Of course, when everyone was asked upon what did you base your plan for Anywhere Town, what do you think they said? The facts, right? So let's look at what it is that we're unconsciously conveying about immigration currently. There's a reason these things are in quotations, right? This is not my language. This is advocacy language. So we get a lot of broken. We get a lot of problem. And it is a problem, and it is broken. I don't mean to discount that. But what we know from cognition is that when we force too much emphasis on, it's a problem, it's a mess, it's broken, it's chaotic, it's horrible, then people have developed a very, very highly evolved mechanism by which they go like this. La, 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 la. That is what our brains do for us. That is a useful, helpful thing. When we double down too hard on the it's a problem, it's a problem, it's a problem, what we're actually conveying is there's nothing that can be done. It's so horrible, you might as well just buy a larger screen TV so that you can ignore it in high definition.